Hey guys, Raises here, and today I'm going to be doing another top 10. And today I'm going to be doing a top 10 of one of my favorite video games of all time and my new favorite Mario game. I'm going to be doing a top 10 on the bosses in Super Mario Galaxy, so let's get started. Number 10 on this list is Top Mania. Well, first, let's start out with the actual boss fight, because this is a list about the top 10 boss fights. Well, the first boss fight we see of him, it's actually pretty bad. So what do? You jump on him really easily, and you spin him into electricity. But the second fight with him is the fight I'm going to be referencing here. The second fight is actually a pretty good fight. It's kind of like the first one, except the electricity keeps moving and you have two other top men, making it a little more challenging. The twist alone with the top men makes the second top man fight a lot more enjoyable and a lot more challenging. Then again, I wouldn't exactly say this fight is really that hard. It's still a great fight and it's a really fun one too. Is Junior. Well, first off, I'm going to say this. This fight is really forgettable, especially compared to the Junior fights you see in the other games, especially Galaxy 2 with like the Boomsday machine. But even if it's forgettable, it is still a good fight. So what do? Junior is on his airship and he shoots a lot of projectiles at you like bullet bills, and then Magic Koopas spawn in to make it more tense. Even if that is, I would still say this fight is pretty easy, especially the first phase. The second phase though puts it on the list on the best, because the second phase, Junior moves the ship, making it a lot more harder with the spot where you can kill him a lot more narrow and harder to actually hit, and there's a lot more projectiles being thrown at you, making it a lot harder. But even if it does, I would still say it's still a pretty easy fight in general. That doesn't mean it's a bad one. I would still say it's a pretty fun fight. The thing with this fight is, it's a fun fight, but that's really all it does. So that's why it's a little lower on my list than it may be on others. Here's another boss that may be lower on my list than it is on other people's lists. So this boss is Major Burrows, and well, essentially, Major Burrows is essentially a Monty Mole when you really think about it, because he just digs into the ground and pops back up. But even if it is, I still really enjoy the boss fight here. So what he does is he digs under the ground and you have to ground pound him for him to come up to where you can actually get a hit. It's a pretty unique fight and it's pretty interesting and pretty fun. There's not really a lot I can really say here besides it being relatively creative and relatively fun. That's really all I can say. Well, on another note, I really like the third phase because, Major Burrows when he gets pissed off is really funny. So, moving on. Number 7 on this list is Camilla. Well, honestly, Camilla here is a pretty great fight, even though I would say it's very similar to Bowser Jr. In theory, these fights pretty much are the same, so what do you have to do? Like Junior, you have to use Koopa shells to throw them back at her. It's not exactly the most original, and then again the most challenging, but honestly it's still a really fun fight, overall. And yeah, that's really all I can say. Well, this fight's still a little harder than Junior's, mainly because Camilla actually teleports. This change makes it a lot better fight than the Junior fight. It makes it more memorable. And it's more memorable considering that it's a fight based off of a Magic Koopa, which is something you don't really ever see ever. Number 6 on this list is where the bosses actually become really good instead of just good. The boss here is Megalite, and this boss gives off a lot of Shadow of the Colossus feels to it. And for this, you basically have to climb up Megalite himself and use the torpedo bullet bills to come and hit the whatever's in the game. I'm not really sure what you call it, but whatever. Even though I don't know what to call it, I still think this is a really fun fight, and climbing up a boss just makes it so much better. it is a really good boss fight, even though, like I said, there's not really much I can really say. It's also pretty easy too. Even though it is, there is still a little tricky part. The final hit can actually be challenging. Here is why. The fence always goes up, and it goes up pretty fast. So you have to strategically monitor the bullet bills and make sure they are following you. And that actually can be a challenge when the fence always comes up when you think you actually get a hit. Even if it is, the first two phases are pretty easy, which makes it come back a little bit. But either of the cases, this is still a fantastic boss. 5 is one of the more memorable bosses in Mario Galaxy. And who is that, you may be asking? Well, considering you already see on the screen, it is none other than King Caliente. So this boss fight is essentially a weird type of tennis game. So what happens is, he shoots fireballs and then he shoots coconuts, which you use to hit back at him. And he also hits them back at you, and it's kind of like a tennis game in that way. This is a really creative boss fight. It's really nice that it's not a boss where you just have to jump on his head 3 times like all the Koopalings and Bowser Jr. in other games. Here you get to attack him in other ways besides spinning him and jumping on his head. It's a really creative boss fight, and it's especially what Mario needed because a lot of the boss fights in recent years aren't really creative. I'm looking at you, Koopalings, in every single new Super Mario Bros. Game. Here is a boss I may be putting way too high on my list, but honestly, I don't really care. This is my list, and Fiery Dino Piranha is just a fantastic boss all around. So why am I putting him this high, you may be asking? Well, honestly, I find his fight to be really dang fun. So what happens? You take the original Dino Piranha fight, even though that fight is basically a joke, but what you do with that fight is, his tail is basically on fire. This one change alone makes the fight a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun and a lot more challenging. That change alone makes Fiery Dino Piranha one of the best bosses in the game because, well, if I'm being honest, this is probably the hardest boss for me in the game. And honestly, I really had the most fun beating this boss aside from number 2 and number 1. So what are those? Well, watch the video and continue. Number 3 on this list is Bouldergeist. Well, what else is there to say? This is freaking Bouldergeist. Well, Bouldergeist is an amazing boss fight. So he shoots rocks and bomb at you, and you have to use a bomb he shoots at you in order to hit him. It's a pretty creative boss fight. And on top of that, there's actually a pretty good song. Speaking of songs, you better go watch SuperMarioManiac's top 10 Mario Galaxy songs list, so go watch that. But back to Bouldergeist. Yeah, I really like his fight. It might not be the hardest thing ever when you realize what his patterns are, but that doesn't mean it's not really fun. The fight here is really fun. There's a lot of fun and gratification when you have to swing the boot throws. It's just a really fun fight overall, even though it could be hard. But honestly, there's not really much I can say. Actually, wait for this. The music is fantastic, like I said. So combine fantastic music with the fun overall enjoyment and creativity, and you get Bouldergeist, one of the best bosses in the game. Number 2 on this list is really the most underrated boss. Really, I've not heard a lot of people talk about Kingpin in the past. Well, Kingpin is just a fantastic boss overall, and for me, it is the hardest boss in the game. Why is it the hardest boss in the game, and objectively one of the best in the game? Well, it's more because you are not in your normal area when you have to fight other bosses. Here, you are underwater, so you have to use a different moveset than what you have on land. This one change alone makes it so much harder and more enjoyable. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the swimming controls in Mario Galaxy, here I think they work really well, mainly because you are using the Koopa shells to swim faster and to aim and throw them at Kingpin. Even though the whole Koopa Shell gimmick thing, it's not exactly the most original as it was seen in 2 other bosses in this game, it is still a really fun fight. And also, let's not forget this, it takes 5 hits instead of 3, which really makes it more harder. This boss, Kingpin, is great in pretty much every single way. It has great music, it's really fun, it's a lot harder because you are underwater, meaning you have limited moveset, and in general, it is just fantastic. But the real question is, what could beat it? Yeah, I don't even know why I asked who could beat it, because at this point, you all know who number 1 is. And if you don't, then get out from under the rock you're living under, please. Well, number 1 is none other than Bowser. Bowser is fantastic in literally every single way. So honestly, Bowser is my favorite Mario boss fight ever. Why? Well, first, the music. The music sets the tone that Bowser is not playing around and that he's actually serious. And also, let's not forget that the music is freaking amazing. Yeah, the 2 songs that are in the Bowser fights, let's just say that they are some of the best Mario music ever made. And also, this fight is really fun. The music adds a lot of tension to it, which makes it great. And the overall enjoyment, yeah, you pretty much have to smack Bowser across a ton of planetoids and it's really fun. Really wouldn't say this is exactly the hardest boss fight ever, even though more difficulty would have been appreciated. I would still say this is my favorite boss because this is the boss I've had the most fun playing, and the music alone makes it amazing in every single way possible. It's a lot better than Galaxy 2's final boss, but honestly, whatever. This boss is fantastic nonetheless. Overall, Bowser is my favorite boss in Mario Galaxy. Thank you guys for watching, and let me know your thoughts on the top 10 Mario Galaxy boss fights. Who would you put in which place? And overall, this is Raze, and see ya.